Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Barbara Olioso from the Green Chemist Consultancy. It's a great pleasure to be here, even if virtually. And thank you so much, Dr. Brunke and Dr. Beate, for inviting me to the ICADA Expo in Germany. So today I'm going to speak about green chemistry and how it can be used for cosmetic preservation, and also how it can be used for waste reduction in formulations. So the agenda is why we need to consider more for less. There are several reasons. How can green chemistry really be an answer to meet the demand for more for less? And then what tool I developed to help you with going down the green chemistry preservation route, and then my conclusions, and then it will be your turn to ask your questions. So a little bit about me. I have over 20 years experience as a cosmetic formulator, and since the beginning of my career I did use green chemistry, even though it was the early days at the time, but the industry has been innovating a lot, so a lot of new ingredients have come to market, and I've also been using several organic green certifications in my formulations work. I'm a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry and the UK Society of Cosmetic Scientists, where I'm based, but I work internationally, and I don't just formulate, I also help with concept development and also technical advice all over the world. And another passion of mine is sustainability in general, and I have the pleasure of moderating the Sustainability Corner at In Cosmetics Global, which I would like to invite you this year, early April. We'll have a live as well as a virtual edition. The virtual edition will be after the live edition, where there will be great presentations of various suppliers to share their sustainable innovation. And then I also write on 3 magazines, and I got an article coming up on this very topic at the time of In Cosmetics. So what's happening really, especially with the pandemic, with all sorts of things going on, there has been quite a shift in consumers' value. And I saw this university study done here in the UK, which was representative of the UK population, and this study was done on several thousands of people, and it was done for fashion. But what's very interesting about it is that only 4% now are influenced by celebrities' endorsements, something that we would never ever thought about pre-pandemic, but now post-pandemic there are bigger concerns emerging in consumers, and they are related to sustainability issues, ethical issues, how also social issues, how workers are treated in the factories. So waste is becoming more and more of a taboo, and we know it fits with the circular economy and so on, and it's also triggering several trends in the cosmetic industry. So again, about this study, it shows that especially the younger people, because obviously they got quite a challenge ahead, they choose to shop according to environmental and sustainability values in view of reducing waste. They are also prepared to pay a little bit more, but obviously they want validation, they want reassurance that the product has that environmental benefit. So this is happening in the fashion industry, which is a much bigger industry, but we know there is a straight connection between fashion and cosmetics. Cosmetics are very emotional also, and during the pandemic people have been using more and more cosmetics for well-being, and it doesn't make much sense to use cosmetics for well-being if they're not aligned with these environmental, social values that consumers value more and more. So another reason why we need to think about green chemistry for preservation, there is this mistrust towards preservatives. I don't want to, justify this. This is what I see, in the marketplace. There are lots of claims which shouldn't, which are not allowed, but they still happen. And because of this change of habits during the pandemic, everybody went online. They also use it as a research tool, and so they do specific research, keywords which are associated with cosmetic preservatives. There is a lot of also misinformation online, unfortunately, but it's very difficult to change that perception, because human nature is geared for survival, and if it's geared for survival, the danger, the fear will stick more than the positive claims. So that's why I think the waste reduction related claims, or the use of this green chemistry to meet this trend, I think it's quite an interesting one, because it meets another sort of, it reduces the pain of the the environmental concern people share more and more. So for the industry, there is also other good reasons to switch to, or to start embracing multifunctionals, which are they're not meant to be against preservatives. It's just an additional tool that formulators, the industry, can use to address the challenge, to face the challenge that Annex 5 is shrinking. I was reading also there might be further restrictions for sodium hydroxymethyl glycinate coming up. And this is related also to the fact that the industry has been very successful in the last 20-30 years, so people are using cosmetics more and more, so we have less preservatives, we have more cosmetics, and this means higher exposure, and higher exposure, then the safety needs to be readjusted in view of the higher exposure. Therefore, reducing the exposure generally of preservatives from Annex 5 is a way to really safeguard them, and long term. And there is also some interesting innovation coming up in relation to some green chemistry ingredients in relation to the skin microbiome, and how they have a selective antimicrobial activity that is doesn't interfere much with the skin microbiome. So very interesting innovation. So green chemistry, so why green chemistry is an answer to this more for less, because green chemistry is in its sort of initial concept that is geared for waste reduction, and so a lot of there are quite a few green chemistry ingredients that have a primary function of being emulsifiers, surfactants, humectants, skin conditioners, antioxidants, fragrances, and also SPF boosters, with the additional function of antimicrobial. It could be also bacteriostatic, not just antimicrobial. So this gives the chance to formulators to achieve double functionality or more within the formula, which is very much in line with waste reduction, and having a sort of very sort of focused formulation rather than having all sorts of ingredients doing different things, and it makes perfect sense. So a little bit about green chemistry, if you're not familiar with it. It was a general guideline which was devised in the 90s by two chemists, John Warner and Paul Anastas, and it's not set in stone. There are guidelines, because we know science is about details, and if you put things in stone, then you haven't got the flexibility to to evolve and change, improve, because you need the flexibility to adjust. And so what matters in green chemistry is really the 12 principles, and the number one is waste reduction. And when you look really, all the other principles which are in it are very much the same, even though they are sort of expressed from different point of view. So there is the maximize the reagents within a chemical reaction. So that means if you have two reagents, you want the highest amount of these two reagents ending up in your finished desired product. You also want efficient molecules that perform well. Also the chemical process itself needs to be safe for humans, the operators, and the environment. In the past, unfortunately, there was more of a linear approach, not linear like green chemistry, where there wasn't much thinking about the hazards associated with the reagents, even though the finished product wasn't hazardous, and therefore we learned the hard way. But green chemistry wants to increase this awareness about using these clean, safe chemical processes. So also energy, again, waste reduction of energy, using renewable ingredients. It's not 100%, but still going in that direction, because we keep on evolving, improving with the technology. Also having a simple, less steps within the chemical reaction, selective catalyst, so you don't end up with a lot of byproducts. And again, in the past, there have been byproducts which were toxic, and then they had to be disposed or hidden somewhere, and this is not sustainable anymore. And so green chemistry talks about that. And what also talks about is the end of life of a molecule or a chemical, if you like. What happens once we have used it? And so it talks about a benign end of life, which is basically biodegradability and also low aquatic toxicity as well. So the pollution and prevention, again, if you don't want to spill all these solvents or byproducts or whatever into the environment, or if they do, they don't want to be polluting substances. So and also the monitoring during the process. So it's a lot of details, but this is just to show that it's aiming in one direction, even though you have to have principles, which is waste reduction, which is what with the buzzword of today. So how do we use green chemistry for cosmetic preservation? So we are usually talking about ingredients with a certain antimicrobial activity. Usually they're either antibacterial or antifungal or bacteriostatic, and in that case they need to be combined, obviously. So they require usually a synergistic blend to achieve the broad spectrum. So there are quite a few variables, and if you are sort of more familiar with it, you can pick and choose. Or there are also blends, ready-made blends of the market, including the ones now with Annex 5 preservatives. And it is a more complex process. I'm not going to to give you a different story. I'm going to tell you straight. But I think that's where the industry is going, and the industry is all about innovation and giving consumers, meeting consumers' desires, and obviously safe products as well. So how do you go about it, right? So the first is there are many decisions to take, and the first decision, I think, before you start the journey of the selection of what multifunctionals to try or not, is really if you want to be Annex 5 free or not, or preservative free. Obviously you still need a preservative system, because most of cosmetic products are water-based, so you need some kind of preservative system, and you decide if you want to be Annex 5 free or not. This is a very important decision, and you need really to discuss it in relation to your concept and brand messages, even though you will still want to comply with the guidelines of cosmetic claims. The other option is to use lower levels of preservatives in combination with multifunctionals, or you can also use them to boost an existing whatever preservative system you have, and maybe you change the packaging, something you might have a challenge of some sort. You can also call on multifunctionals to boost the performance of your preservative system. So once you take this decision, then you can go into the other details of your decision-making process. And I've done here these this illustration to show you that really you need to sort of think with this multi-parametric mindset, and you need to find a sort of a sweet spot. So it's not a straightforward process. There might be a lot of backwards and forwards to find the ingredient that, or the ingredients, the blend, whatever, that works for you. So regulations are important. The formula, what kind of formula and packaging, what kind of green ethos, and there are a few aspects, different takes on that. Everybody has slightly different views. Again, it's also about the market, the target market, and the safety data and the cost. So in more detail here, so the shades of green, what shades of green are we talking about? There are different ones. So there is the ISO 16128, which only takes into account the natural origin of a substance. It doesn't take into account the what kind of chemistry was involved. It was green chemistry or whatever. So the ISO 16128 with the various indexes is one way to go about it. So just focusing on the actual origin of the ingredient. And also there are other ways, which is also, for example, there are some other certification bodies like Cosmos and True, and they're slightly different, but in that case they embrace green chemistry principles in their in the criteria to allow to approve particular ingredients. So that is one important criteria. Another one is the formula, and the key one of the key parameters of the formula is really what is the pH, because quite a few of these multifunctionals are pH sensitive. So you need to make sure that that substance will perform the way it's meant to perform in your formula. That's absolutely critical. And also the cationic and anionic, and there is also the chemical compatibility to think about. Also the packaging can be an ally or not. So if you have an airless type of solution, then you are talking about a lower danger of microbial contamination, and therefore you can sort of gear for a sort of a not as stringent or not as sturdy preservative system. If you have an open jar, then the packaging is not your friend really, because it's not protecting the product, and that means that you really need a sturdy system in place to cope with all that constant contamination. And where it's going to be sold, that's the regulatory aspect. The cost is critical. These green chemistry ingredients have been obtained via a lot of R&D research, and so a lot has been invested into them, and obviously they're also from renewable sources, even though now even there are some Annex 5 preservatives from bio-based sources, because there is a lot of innovation. The big suppliers respond to this demand of the renewable, the circularity concept. So the cost is critical, but obviously that's something you discuss with your supplier, and the safety data also with your supplier and your safety assessor. You really need to work with a safety assessor that is experienced with multifunctionals, because there are some safety assessors that prefer Annex 5 preservatives, and others that are sort of more experienced, and so they got the data from other sources to assess the safety of the product. And obviously the test, that's what you need to do. So as you can see, it is complicated, but I came up with an interactive tool that can help you with point 2, a little bit of point 3, and also point 5, right? And how I did it after so many years of working with these multifunctionals was via this interactive tree-free ebook, which is also available on the SOFW platform, and I just updated it. So in it you can see It's interactive because you can sort of go from one section to another in the book, and I show you here the key sections in the book. So there is an introduction, also various shades of green, in different parts of the world, including the ISO and etc. And I go into the various protocols used by the industry. The ISO standard, I would say, is the one that makes more sense, but everybody's different. Some brands have particular requirements. They prefer different protocols, and there is a section about how to use the book, the regulations and the green status charts, because I sort of summarize all of these ingredients in different tables in order to sort of get to know them and do the selection process according to different parameters. So it could be pH, it could be a summary with all the INCI name and regulatory status, the temperature, and the regulations. So I thought it's easier if I show you rather than explaining it, because it's complicated. So I've done a very crazy example. I decided to be preservative free or Annex 5 free, and I want to be 100% plant derived. I want to be Cosmos compliant, and this is a mineral SPF, so it means we're talking about a challenging pH, which is around 7, but we got bottled with a pump dispenser just to make life a little bit easier. So it's going to be a leave-on product for the body, and I want to sell it in Europe and US. And so then obviously once you've done the selection, then you do all these additional checks, so the price and the safety and the testing is the final step, obviously. But so just to give you an idea of how this interactive book can be used, here you can see in this chart, if you're working, you're working at pH, just above 7, then you will see what substances function in that range, and then there is an hyperlink on the substance that would allow you to, jump on in that section. And that is because I showed you that table because I decided, to go just pure multifunctionals. But there are also other tables, and I'm showing here another type of table where if I went for a preservative type of blend, then, and this is a summary chart, you can see here that you have a pH range for each substance, so it's not as visual as the other chart, but it's still there. You have the temperature stability, because if it's a hot process, different processes, you want to know what temperature to add your multifunctional, because obviously that can affect the functionality of it. The Cosmos status, if it's approved or compliant or not. The natural origin index according to the ISO standard, and also I put there if it's approved in Europe, US, China, and the proposition 65 as well. And you also have the INCI listing as well, because it's good to have all that condensed information, and it saves a lot of time to formulators. So, and this is an example of the temperature, again, just for fun. And so if I select, as I said, if I want to, we want plant-based, so we want an ISO index of 1, we want it Cosmos compliant, we want it to work at pH above 7, so I selected this. And, as you can see, it's got the symbol of the multifunctionals, the pale green and darker green there. And you can see just a little brief description about it, the INCI name, the CAS, etc. So you get more into the detail of the actual ingredient there, so that you can eventually find the distributor, etc., and get on with your work. So this was a simple example. It's complicated, but the book is meant to really help formulators with the first steps. So my conclusions are that really consumers' values today are changing very quickly. With the pandemic, I think the pandemic was a big disruption in the values, and they're so hot on environmental sustainability issues, and waste is becoming more and more of a taboo. And as an industry, we face the challenge of meeting these new, stronger sustainability values, and at the same time, comply with the regulations, and at the same time also creating compelling messages. And so I think waste reduction is, probably a much better way to go about communicating the value of the use of the multifunctional rather than the preservative free. Obviously, then you need to do your claim validation. So green chemistry really, I think, is able to combine the consumer's values and the industry. So it's a win-win, I think, for both parties. Quite often, consumers can be quite emotional and the industry is quite rational, and it's like, oh, how do the two meet? And I think green chemistry is really a meeting point where you can deliver sort of some sustainability values by using these green chemistry ingredients, which are pricier, but you achieve a point of difference, and you also have the opportunity of providing more innovation, because there is a lot of innovation going on. And we know that Annex 5 is too expensive to enter a new ingredient, registered ingredient Annex 5. So I think it's very unlikely you will get new entries there. So I think this is where we are in the industry. So this ebook, I hope is going to help formulators to get familiar with this new way of going about cosmetic preservation with multifunctionals, which are not meant to be denigrating of preservatives. On the opposite is true. They're meant to help keep the exposure low, and therefore time-proof them as a result. So this handbook is available on my website, or also the SOFW. And if you wish to contact me, you can do so via my website, via the contact form. If you have any, if you need technical advice or whatever, please, or sustainability, you want to think about how to embody your sustainability ethos in your formulas, please do get in touch. And now, thank you very much for listening, and I would like to end saying that the American way, which is where the US is the country where green chemistry was born, we can do it with green chemistry. Thank you very much for listening, and have a lovely day, and I welcome now your questions.